Arjuna is speaking. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we killed the sons...
1 second. Yes, good.
Okay.
Yes.
So Arjuna says, nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. If we killed the sons of Dhritarashtra, we should not care to live. Yet they are now standing before us on the battlefield. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Arjuna did not know whether he should fight and risk unnecessary violence. Although fighting is the duty of the Kshatriyas, or whether he should refrain and live by begging. If he did not conquer the enemy, begging would be his only means of subsistence. Nor was there certainty of victory, because either side might emerge victorious. Even if victory awaited them and their cause was justified, still, if the sons of Dhritarashtra died in battle, it would be very difficult to live in their absence. Under the circumstances, that would be another kind of defeat for them. All these considerations by Arjuna definitely prove that not only was he a great devotee of the Lord, but he was also highly enlightened and had complete control over his mind and senses. His desire to live by begging, although he was born in the royal household, is another sign of detachment. He was truly virtuous, as these qualities, combined with his faith in the words of instruction of Sri Krishna, his spiritual master, indicate. It is concluded that Arjuna was quite fit for liberation. Unless the senses are controlled, there is no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge, and without knowledge and devotion, there's no chance of liberation. Arjuna was competent in all these attributes over and above his enormous attributes in his material relationships. Now, this is very interesting because it says, unless the senses are controlled, there's no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge. And without knowledge and devotion, there's no chance of liberation. This is a very important statement being made here. And there's one thing that is absolutely necessary if you want to make advancements in Krishna consciousness. You must accept a bona fide spiritual master. And the first spiritual master that we accept is Srila Prabhupada. We're reading the books that he wrote with the purports that he was written. So he is our first guru. And then anyone who represents Srila Prabhupada correctly without changing anything, adding anything, or subtracting anything that he has written, they're also bona fide to be guru. Why? Because they're not changing anything Prabhupada says or anything, or they're not changing or deleting anything Prabhupada said. They are simply repeating what Prabhupada says. And Prabhupada said, you simply have to repeat what I have said, and you will be successful. And that's the fact. So we don't have to be over intelligent by saying, well, maybe I can change this or change that. No, nothing. The motto in Krishna consciousness is no change. But the nonsense people, they want to shortchange. But we don't want to shortchange. We want no change. We want pure Prabhupada teachings. So uh, Arjuna was truly virtuous, and combined with his faith in the words of instruction of Sri Krishna, his spiritual master, it is concluded that Arjuna was quite fit for liberation. Unless the senses are controlled, there's no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge, and without knowledge and devotion, there's no chance of liberation. Arjuna was competent in all these attributes over and above his enormous attributes in his material relationships. So, in life, we should have both material attributes and spiritual attributes. The material attributes we use to function in society, but not for sense gratification, for doing good to others, para upakar. And we should have spiritual attributes to help people overcome their weaknesses of intoxication, meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and so forth, so that they can make spiritual advancement. Without giving up those four things, no one can make spiritual advancement. It's absolutely necessary that those four things are given up. And they can be given up rather easily if you associate with devotees on a steady basis. And then you can make the change from eating meat to eating only prasadam. And instead of engaging in illicit sex, you have sex only for procreation. And once you have a child, one or two children or three children, then that's it, you stop. And now you take the full responsibility to train them to become good devotees. That's the real purpose of life, that at least you should have three children. Otherwise, if people stop having children or they only have one child, eventually there won't be enough people to do all the things that are needed to be done to maintain a society. Nowadays, nobody wants to get married. Nobody wants to have children. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people are deciding not to get married and not to have children. And that's a mistake. But obviously, if you're not ready to be Krishna conscious yourself, you're not going to be ready to teach your children to be Krishna conscious. So it's a complete failure all around. You will not go back to Godhead, and there won't be any children to maintain society in the future. Okay, so number one, unless the senses are controlled, there's no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge. And without knowledge and devotion, there's no chance of liberation. Arjuna was competent in all these attributes over and above his enormous attributes in his material relationship. Very important statements. So we have to become capable of controlling our senses, which includes eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and also mind, intelligence, and ego. We have to control these senses. And there are five gross senses and five subtle senses, and three subtle senses. So we have to be able to control them to be a genuine person and be able to help others. You can't help others if you are not able to control these things. Unless the senses are controlled, there's no chance of elevation to the platform of knowledge. And without knowledge and devotion, there is no chance of liberation. Arjuna was competent in all these attributes over and above his enormous attributes in his material relationship. So Arjuna was not a pundit. He was a warrior. That proves that from any position, if you follow Krishna consciousness sincerely, you can become an exceptional person. You could be a Sudra, you could be a warrior, you could be a, uh, you know, just this plain worker. From any position, you can become a unique devotee if we follow the principles of Krishna consciousness. And eventually, we will develop the knowledge and devotion by which we can not only liberate ourselves, but help many other people become liberated. So we go to text 7, which is a very famous verse. Karpanyadoso pahata svabhava prichami tvam dharma samudacheta yatsheyasya sitam ruhitan me sisyasteham tadimam tvam prapanam. Arjuna is saying, now I am confused about my duty and have lost all composure because of miserly weakness. In this condition, I am asking you, meaning Krishna, to tell me for certain what is best for me. Now I am your disciple and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. By nature's own way, the complete system of material activities is a source of perplexity for everyone. Perplexity means confusion for everyone. In this condition, in every step there is perplexity. And therefore, it behooves one to approach a bona fide spiritual master who can give one proper guidance for executing the purpose of life. All Vedic literatures advise us to approach a bona fide spiritual master to get free from the perplexities, meaning the confusion of life, which happen without our desire. They are like a forest fire that somehow blazes without being set by anyone. Similarly, the world situation is such that perplexities of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place, and we all become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom, therefore, advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. Now I'm going to stop right there. When it says that, a person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. That doesn't mean you have to know differential, what do you call it?
Calculus.
Calculus and all kinds of other things. All you have to do is just know what Guru is teaching. That's good. And Guru is going to teach you Bhagavad Gita. So if you just stick to the Bhagavad Gita and hear it from a bona fide teacher, a bona fide devotee, then you will know everything. That everything means everything in Krishna consciousness and how to become a devotee. That's what he's talking about. It doesn't mean you know every little thing, but you know the most important thing, that is how to go back to Godhead, because you've been trained by a bona fide devotee. The world situation is such that perplexities, meaning confusions, of life automatically appear without our wanting such confusion. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place, and we become perplexed. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. Our disciplic succession is Brahma, Madhva, Gaudiya, Sampradaya. No one wants fire, and yet it takes place. Haribol. And we become perplexed. Haribol. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not, therefore, remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. So then again, don't be confused by what it says here, that a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. He knows everything about Krishna consciousness. It's not that he knows differential equations and so many other things, that he knows everything about Krishna consciousness and how to teach people to go back to Godhead. Who is the man in material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In the Brihad Aranyakya Upanishad 3.8.10, the perplexed man is described as follows. Yova itad aksharam gargi avid it vasmal lokat praiti sa kripana. He is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life as a human and who thus quits the world like the cats and dogs without understanding the science of self-realization. I like the way Prabhupada says the science of self-realization. Let's look up the word science. It's very interesting to know that word. The Vedic wisdom therefore advises that in order to solve the perplexities of life and to understand the science of the solution, one must approach a spiritual master who is in the disciplic succession. A person with a bona fide spiritual master is supposed to know everything. One should not, therefore, remain in material perplexities, but should approach a spiritual master. This is the purport of this verse. So what does it say?
The structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained.
Now, see, that is a very incomplete definition. They completely erased the spiritual world. So you can't really be a scientist if you erase the spiritual world. And even the material world, which is a inverted reflection of the spiritual world, right? So they cannot really be a scientist. You can't be really a scientist if you only have half of the knowledge or half of the picture. You see. And that's why no problems are really solved. Just like, in every 20, 30 years, there's always this question about, how are we going to stop war, And after the war is over and so many people have died, then people say, well, that's the last war, we're never going to have it again. But it happens again and again and again. Why? Because they don't have full knowledge. And full knowledge means spiritual knowledge and material knowledge, right? You need to have material knowledge so it doesn't become let's say, a burden or obstructive of making mistakes. And we should have spiritual knowledge to know what the real purpose of life is. But we should also be able to navigate through the material knowledge in the material world by knowing how to use material knowledge, not to get trapped by different situations in the material world, right? So, but the best way to learn about the material knowledge or the material world is not necessarily to, drink liquor and engage in illicit sex and things like that. You can understand everything about the material world by reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada explains everything about the material world. And so that we don't see, if you learn by hearing, that's the best. Hearing spiritual knowledge spoken by a genuine devotee. Some people say, okay, but I want to see it also. All right. So you hear and you see. And then some people say, well, wait a minute. I want to hear, I want to see, but I want to do also. Okay. But that's not first class knowing. First class knowing is simply by hearing from bona fide devotees. And if you learn by hearing from bona fide devotees, you can avoid so many problems in life. In fact, you can avoid almost all the problems of life. And this is what people don't understand. You don't have to hear, see, and do in order to understand something. You can understand it perfectly by hearing from a bona fide devotee. And that's what we do in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so who is the man in material perplexities? It is he who does not understand the problems of life. In the Brihad Aranyakya Upanishad 3.8.10, the perplexed man is described as follows. Yova itad aksharam gargi avitit vasmal lukat praitina kripana. He is a miserly man who does not solve the problems of life as a human and who thus quits the world like cats and dogs without understanding the science of self-realization. Very, very important statement. And therefore, he's a miserly man. So if we don't try to understand how to get out of the entanglement of material life, birth, death, old age, and disease, we're a miser. Miser is someone who cheats themselves, who deprives themselves of knowledge and of wisdom and so forth. So it's sort of a self-destructive consciousness that a person has. Then it says, this human form of life is a most valuable asset for the living entity who can utilize it for solving the problems of life. Therefore, one who does not utilize this opportunity properly is a miser. On the other hand, there is the Brahmana, or he who is intelligent enough to utilize this body to solve all problems of life. Ya itadaksharam gargi vidit vamsal vidit vasmal lokat praitista brahmana. The kripanas, or miserly persons, waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc., in the material conception of life. Now, there's nothing wrong. Let's not misinterpret this. There's nothing wrong with family life and let's say society, country, etc. What's wrong about it is being engaged for sense gratification with the family and the society and the country. But if you engage the family, the society, and country in Krishna consciousness, then it becomes an asset. It doesn't become something that is negative. Everything is about freeing yourself from the material conception of life. What is the material conception of life? It's basically sense gratification. And unless we can use the senses to please Krishna's senses, then there's no sense gratification. That's the real purpose of our senses and our intelligence. We have gross senses and we have subtle senses. The gross senses are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and the subtle senses are mind, intelligence, and ego. So if we use all these senses to please the senses of Krishna, then we make spiritual progress. But if we use the senses to please them for sense gratification, then we become trapped in the cycle of birth and death. And that can go on forever because we have an eternal soul. If we keep making the same mistake every time we come to the human form of life, we could stay eternally in the material world and suffer. But if we make a decision that, okay, I've already passed through all the 8,400,000 species of life, at least now I've come back to the human form of life, I'm going to use this whole experience as a human being for self-realization and for devotional service so that I can go back to Godhead and maybe take many other people with me back to Godhead. One person in a family who becomes Krishna conscious can save 21 generations of his family. 21 generations. Okay, so it says, the Kripanas, or the miserly persons, waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc., in the material conception of life. So you can be affectionate for family, society, and country in the spiritual conception of life, as opposed to the material conception of life. The material conception of life is to eat, drink, and be merry with sense gratification. The spiritual conception of life is working to please the senses of Krishna. So Krishna also has eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and so forth. So when we engage in worshiping the deity of the Lord, well, we're working to please the senses of the Lord. The Lord is not senseless. He also has senses. And our senses also belong to the Lord. They're not something that belong to us. He's endowed us with a body and senses. And therefore, they should only be used in the service of the Lord. This requires education. You have to hear these things. You have to understand. That's why we have a body. That's why we have mind and senses. It should be used only to please the Lord because the Lord owns these things. It's not something that we own. These things have been given to us by the mercy of the Lord, but they belong to Him. Therefore, they should only be used in the service of the Lord. This is hard to understand. See, proprietorship is very important concept. Society or societies are determined by the concept of proprietorship. So you have communism, you have socialism, and you have capitalism, and you have different types of proprietorship theories that are the basis of societies. And then you have the mixtures also, capitalism mixed with communism or socialism and so forth. So you have the mixed types and you have the pure types. Now, all of those different types of proprietorship are wrong. There's only one correct concept of proprietorship. Everything belongs to Krishna. Therefore, everything should be used in Krishna's service. That's the correct concept of proprietorship. But we see in this world many incorrect concepts of proprietorship, and the concept of proprietorship determines what kind of society you have. And you can see, like Karl Marx, he had his concept of proprietorship, and you have the capitalists that have their concept of proprietorship, and you have the socialists that have their concept of proprietorship. And nobody is satisfied in those different types of proprietorship. The only proprietorship that can lead to real satisfaction is Krishna is the owner of everything, and everything should be used in the service of Krishna. If we come to that conclusion in our life, then everything becomes easy because Krishna will protect us, give us knowledge to make the right decisions. And eventually, if a whole society comes to that concept of proprietorship belongs to Krishna, then there can be peace and happiness and good fortune for everyone. So it says here, one is often attached to family life, namely to wife, children, and other members, on the basis of skin disease. I like the way Prabhupada writes, skin disease. What is skin disease? It means you ignore the fact that you have an eternal soul and you think you're only this body. That's what skin disease is, right? But the body, I mean, if you say, I am this body, I can ask you a question. I said, which body are you talking about? You've changed your body so many times, and you're going to continue to change it until the moment of death. So you cannot say I am this body, because you've had many different bodies, and it's always fluctuating. But you can say, I am the witness of all the changes. That's who I am. Okay? And that's the soul. The soul is the witness of all the changes of the body. But people don't think like that because they don't listen to Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, they're confused. And because of that, there are wars based on bodily attachments. So you have, black people, and you have brown people, and you have white people, and you have yellow people. And as long as people have the bodily conception of life, there are always going to be wars. There's always going to be conflict, and there's not going to be any real peace. Even people of the same ethnicity kill each other. They look the same, they eat the same food, they went to the same schools, and even they kill each other because there's no real education anymore. I mean, everyone learns to be a sense gratifier, and that's not education, that's ignorance. But if you use your senses to please the senses of Krishna, now you're coming to a level of real education. And your activities in life will be spiritual activities. And you can spiritualize your mind, your body, by taking prasadam and hearing regularly lectures given by genuine devotees and engaging in devotional service, going on Sankirtan and preaching. And in this way, you have a spiritual life, and your friends are all spiritual people, and your goals are spiritual goals. Say, you dovetail your goals into Krishna consciousness. So there's nothing wrong with making $1 million a day. Why? Well, because you can only eat or spend money, maybe for maintenance, maybe for $100 a day or $500 a day, depending on what level you're living, and all the rest should be used in Krishna's service. That way, there is no karma. Purvani karmani jijiva chitam samaha evam tvayi nanitetus na karma lipite nare. Not karma lipite nare. If you follow the first and second verse of the Ishopanishad, then you can live for hundreds and thousands of years because you have no karma, because you're using everything in the service of Krishna. And therefore, there's no karma, there's no adverse, let's say, conditions, because the Lord is protecting you. Okay, so, yeah, it's time? Okay. So are there any questions? We'll stop right there. Yes.
If sense gratification is, do we need to consider it as a sacrifice or austerity, or when do we think it is a sacrifice?
Okay, good question. Well, when you eat prasadam, there's sense gratification. You understand? You're pleasing your senses, your hunger, your tongue. But you're doing it by, you know, having prasadam instead of just food. Prasadam is not just food, it's a supernatural product because it's been offered first to Krishna and then Krishna offers it back to you. So materialistic people don't believe these things. Only a devotee can believe these things, right? That's why the materialistic people, they suffer so much. So your question is, what was your question again?
Do we need to consider it as a sacrifice or austerity, or
What is?
the sense gratification?
Controlling
Controlling the senses. Controlling the senses.
to sacrifice or an austerity.
It is a duty. It's a duty. If you want to be a devotee, then people talk about sacrifices and things like that. But devotee functions according to duties, and that's called dharma. Dharma is your occupational duty to serve God. You see, it's not an ordinary thing. Why? Because one, we're part and parcel of the Lord. We all came from the Lord. So therefore, our duty is to serve the Lord. You see, our occupational duty in life is to serve the Lord. And so people don't see things like that. They don't understand that. But in a mundane level, they understand. Like, let's say you have a father and a mother, right? So you have a duty to serve them when they get old and sick and so forth. Right? Now, not everybody does that, but most people do it. They will take care of their parents when they get old, right? As a duty, because they're children and they grew up with their parents taking care of them. Now their parents are sick, so it's a duty of the children to take care of the parents. But our real occupational duty is to serve Krishna because we all come from Krishna. Now, Krishna doesn't get sick. He doesn't need anything, but he does appreciate our service. That's what he's looking for because he wants everyone to come back to Godhead. And the way you go back to Godhead is by serving Krishna with love and devotion. Okay? So that's our real duty in life. And that's our real father and mother. That's a real genesis. And actually, there's no genesis because the soul is eternal. But we don't, understand these things. So we talk in terms of this is my father, this is my mother. But we've had many fathers and mothers, right? As human beings and as dogs and cats and so forth. You see? So we want to put an end to this and go back to Godhead. And you can do that by practicing Krishna consciousness. And in this age of Kali, it's very easy. Krishna made it very, very easy to go back to Godhead. And he has given us certain perks. The perk is a way to make things easier for you. All right. So what are some of those perks? So in previous times, if you thought of doing something evil, and you would get karma. But today, or presently, if you think of doing something evil, you must do it in order to get the karma. Previously, like Satya Yuga and so forth, you thought of doing something evil, just thinking about it, you would get the karma. And next, if you think of performing pious activities, even if you don't do it, you get the positive result just by thinking of doing it. Whereas previously, you had to do the pious activity to get the benefit. In Kali Yuga, simply thinking about doing positive things, serving Krishna, and so forth, you get the benefit. Number 3, Rajan Asi Ekumahat Guna Kirtanad Eva Krishnasya Muktasangasya Jayate. In this age, simply by chanting Hare Krishna, you can be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. Previously, it was much more difficult to be free of birth, death, old age, and disease. Let's look at Brahma. Brahma had to meditate 311 trillion years plus 400 million years to liberate himself and see Krishna. Now, none of us could do that, right? We can't even meditate, an hour. So what Brahma had to do is impossible for us to do. But in Kali Yuga, because it's such a bad time to be in the material world, Krishna has made it very easy to go back to God. Much easier than any other time in history. So, and then plus, he's given certain benefits. Like I just said, previously, if you thought of evil, immediately you get the karma. But now, in Kali Yuga, you have to actually do the thing before you to get the karma. And then secondly, if you think of performing a pious activity, you get the benefit in Kali Yuga just by thinking. But previously, you would have to do the pious activity to get the good karma. Right? Number 3, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, you can become liberated, simply by chanting. Number 4, simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and of course Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, one is purified of sins performed over time. One is purified gradually of all the sins that we performed previously, simply by hearing Bhagavatam spoken by a genuine devotee. Number 5, the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 40th verse, which says, any work begun in Krishna consciousness has a permanent effect. Nahabhikamanastosti pratijayana vigite swalpam apyasya dharma jayate mahatovaya. Whatever you do for Krishna becomes a permanent asset eternally. So let's say 1% of your life you spent serving Krishna. 2 good things happen. 1, you're guaranteed a human body in the next life. And 2, you start from 2%. So you cannot be a loser in Krishna consciousness. If you know all these things, then you say, well, my God, Krishna's doing everything to help us come back to Godhead. Right? And then simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one is purified of sins over time. Okay, so these are 5, what you would call perks. Look, that's okay. Oh, she left. What is a perk? You can go PERK. That Krishna is giving us to make it very easy to go back to Godhead. Right. What's it say? PERK?
Work is something extra you get in addition to a salary in exchange for working.
Let's look at the second definition. In other words, it's an advantage.
Yeah.
It's an advantage in this age. That wasn't there in previous ages. It was not there in previous ages. Right? Okay, so we'll stop right there unless there are more questions.
Are there any questions online or comments? Hare Krishna. If there are no
Yeah.
questions, comments.
Is that what you mean?
we'll
Yeah,
See you again.
I made the
Oh,
purchase.